Yo guys, I'm making a video about matchups in Warcraft 3 that I like to play the most. It's going to be a ranked list of matchups where I talk about every matchup, what I like about them, what I like less about them, and then ranking them in order. There will be 16 matchups in total because you can be playing as one of any of the 4 races, and then you can play against 3 other races, and also you can play the mirror matchup. Then I'll have a ranked list about matchups that I like to watch the most, which will be 10 matchups, as you know, Orc versus Elf and Elf versus Orc is the same thing. And you can also use this video to orient your own race picking. I've had a lot of people that said that they got interested to play Warcraft 3 after one of these videos about Warcraft 3, that they're making the jump and either you guys are rediscovering Warcraft 3 and you've played it before, or you're playing for the first time. And one of the most common questions is, what race should I play? Well, perhaps this video can help you make that decision as well. So I'm going to be ranking 26 different matchups, so let's get started. So first of all, favorite matchups to play is going to be a ranked list of 16, right? And I roughly thought about this when I picked my main race. I have mained 3 races in Warcraft 3. In 2002 and 3, I started as a Night Elf player in competitions, and I played 2 international tournaments as Elf. I then had trouble beating Human, so I switched to Human. This was still in Reign of Chaos, and then I mained a tournament as Human, the World Cyber Games 2003. And when Frozen Throne came out, I actually fell in love with Orc the most. And I had already learned from StarCraft Brood War that if you're going to play any race for a very long time and you're going to become an expert in it and main them, you better make sure that you enjoy yourself, which is also one of the most valuable advices my dad ever gave me in life, where he said, no matter what you end up doing, studying or working as, so long as you enjoy yourself, you're going to be aight. Except he didn't say aight because we spoke Dutch and I don't remember how he said it. But he said it's important to find enjoyment in what you do because, well, he only said like 3 words. He doesn't say a lot of words usually. But I can intuit that he meant, if you enjoy yourself, then you're going to be more resilient. You're going to be more persevering. You're going to be better at dealing with the ebbs and flows of life, any challenges. You're going to be less frustrated. So I need to find a race to main that I enjoy the most matchups of. So it will not come as a surprise to you that at the bottom of this list, at rank 1, is going to be something with Orc, because, you know, I am an Orc main player now. I enjoy it the most. I also would like to remind you that even rank 16 is not something I don't enjoy. The worst matchup for me in Warcraft 3 is still better for me to play than many other games that exist. This is a list of winners. Rank 16 is the 16th winner, not the loser, okay? I don't hate this matchup. It's a love list, not a hate list. Nonetheless, at the very top, on rank 16, is going to be Undead versus Undead. Undead versus Undead, to me, is a slightly sillier matchup that I don't enjoy playing as much usually. There's a couple of ways to make it more fun by playing something off meta, but for a large part of Warcraft 3's history, Undead versus Undead would look like something like 3 heroes, Death Knight first, into Lich, and then Crypt Lord, and then people would go for some ghouls, some fiends, but then all of those die to the spells of Impale and Nova, so they start reverting to the magic immune unit, which is destroyers. And then the other guy also makes destroyers, except destroyers are both magic immune and magic damage, which means they can't attack each other. And you cannot nuke them with spells, and they're flying, and they're fairly tanky, but they also do very little damage. They don't really have enough damage to kill heroes that easily, and they can't kill buildings. So for a large part of Undead Mirror, and this is like early 2000s, people would go like 10 destroyers versus 10 destroyers, and nobody can kill each other, and it was so stupid. And I was like, okay, that's enough reason for me never to want to main Undead. Because if I main Undead, I have to play that matchups, and I don't want to do that. There have been some cooler metas as well. Early Reign of Chaos was like mass ghouls versus mass ghouls with banshees and anti-magic shell, and you had heal scrolls and maybe some carrion swarm with DKDL double aura. And then eventually it also transitioned to other things, like early Reforged time and late pre-Reforged era was DK Lich Fiends with Duck Ranger, and then maybe Banshee and some statues. So it'd be Fiends microing against each other. Both have a large ranged army. That's not as bad. And like I said, I do enjoy it now, but I think it's the worst. And part of it, I think, is you're playing Undead, which is probably my least favorite because of the vibe, the atmosphere. I like to have a pleasant, happy atmosphere, not like forced smiles all the time, toxic positivity, but I generally prefer a lush, fertile environment than like emo, dark, death, blight and stuff. So Undead, the vibe is already kind of off, and then Undead versus Undead is really very dark. And then even the fun part of Undead, where you can coil nova someone, that don't even work because coil doesn't work on enemies. It only works to heal, so you can't even use it for damage. That's why Undead is the bottom of this list. Next up, Night Elf versus Night Elf. Night Elf versus Night Elf is actually the matchup that nearly forced me, or led to me, quitting Warcraft 3 forever, which would have changed my life. I like to think for the worse, because I think I got very fortunate being able to make a career out of playing Warcraft 3, first in tournaments and then in show matches and the exhibition of Twitch and YouTube itself. But Night Elf vs. Night Elf was almost the reason that I was going to quit, because in 2003 in the World Cyber Games Netherlands qualifiers, I actually lost 0-2 to Acid Psycho, and I thought I can't deal with this Acid Psycho. And my second older brother actually recommended for me to switch to human in order to use my random skills. He had seen my random skills. He watched me a lot playing Warcraft 3, and I would watch him playing Counter-Strike. And he basically said, give it another try in the double elimination loser bracket with human. At the very least, you'll have some fun and you don't have to play Night Elf. And then I went 2-0, 2-0, 2-0, and I also 2-0'd Acid Psycho in human versus elf. And what did I not like about Elf Mirror? Well, you pretty much just went Demon Hunter, Archers, and then Priestess or something. Or Demon Archers Keeper. And all you did was just make loads of Archers. You would then attack each other's Demon Hunter, because people weren't good enough to take out each other's Archers sometimes. And then you would just drink 3 heal pots each, and whoever had more tankiness would win. It didn't feel extremely tactical. It was kind of a creep fest. Again, this is like Reign of Chaos times. But then in Frozen Throne, what we had was like also Demon Archers, and even today for 20 years it's been Demon Archer against Demon Archer. And I don't like microing ranged units as much in general as melee units. I have always liked melee a little bit more in every game I've ever played, more than ranged. I just prefer the vibe, the feeling. Even when I feel it's unfair and people are shooting at me from afar and I have to run and I just keep getting hit and I keep getting hit. It feels really satisfying to close the distance to an archer and then bash their face in. And Night Elf has a lot of ranged. And there's also Priestess Mass Huntress, which also didn't feel that tactical to me. It just felt like StarCraft. You both make loads of units and then you have to optimize little things, and every game feels the same. So Night Elf Mirror... Oh, the most fun I ever had in Night Elf Mirror was late Reign of Chaos time, when you both started the game making an altar with one wisp, and you send another wisp immediately to the enemy base, and then you build an Ancient of War in their base, and they build one in yours, and then you make your Moonwell, and then you uproot the Ancient, and you start hitting anything you can find. And then you harass each other, and then you make an Ancient of War in your own base, and you start defending against the Ancient of War, and it just keeps slapping each other, and it's just slaps every second, and it was awesome. The matchup slapped. But then when Ancient of Wars got changed, and they were no longer fortified armor, that fell out of vogue, and that was the last time that I enjoyed it the most. So that's rank 15. My next least favorite matchup to play, or my 14th most favorite matchup to play, is Human versus Human. Human versus Human has a little bit the same problem that Undead versus Undead has. I do like it a bit more because Human has been solo base and fast expo, so there's some variety. That already creates 4 permutations. I expo, you expo. I don't expo, you don't expo. I expo, you don't expo. And you expo, I don't expo. Right, that's 4 variations already. That feels more diverse than the other matchups I've mentioned so far. So that's pretty nice. And then there's also been the SK Insomnia meta in 2003, which was like tech to tier 3, get Knights and Mortar teams, and some Priests, and then you fight with 3 heroes. There was the 4K Myth style, which was AM fast tech, no racks, into 2 Sanctum, 40 pop casters. That was pretty fun. And then you would use Blizzard and Paladin second to heal your Archmage. And your Archmage was the tank, Priests were the sustain, and Sorceresses were control. And then Paladin gave healing. It was a pretty cool combination of units. But then in TFT, I feel like the matchup really deteriorated. The most fun part of human versus human for me is battles with tier 3. Both of us on 2 bases, Knights, Mortars, Griffins, Flying Machines, and more. But what often happens is both players are playing mass Spellbreakers, because Blizzard and Clap is potentially so powerful that both players default to mass Spellbreakers. Spellbreakers cannot get Stormbolted or Panda Breath of Fired. They're magic immune, and unlike the Destroyer, they can hit each other. But the Spellbreaker has 7 DPS, which admittedly does get multiplied by 50% bonus damage against medium armor, which Spellbreakers have, so it's more like 10.5 DPS. But on 600 health, with heal scrolls and priests standing behind it, breakers don't die easily. They also cannot be slowed by Bolt, though Bash from Mountain King does offer a solution. And then there's just a lot of hero focusing. I feel like Spellbreakers versus Mass Spellbreaker is a wet noodle contest where you're both slapping each other with wet noodles, which by the way I've never tried, but I think it wouldn't hurt a lot, which is why I think that expression exists. And then you're both trying to just catch the other off guard, doing a Stormbolt Spellbreaker surround and catch a hero. Yeah, it just doesn't feel like a very fun fight to do. I do kind of like to play it, but I like it the rank 14th most to play it. Next up, Undead versus Night Elf. I actually feel like it's pretty tough. This one is mostly here because I feel like it's difficult. I don't think Undead versus Night Elf is uninteresting, but I personally struggle because Undead versus Night Elf is extremely timing based. Undead against Elf usually has to do like an early surgical attack with cool frenzy timing to stop an expansion against overwhelming numbers of fairy dragons or dryads. And you're in a race against the clock and everything needs to be perfect. I think people that enjoy like a Terran all-in StarCraft 2, like the 1-1-1 all-in, SCV, you know, Marines, Medivacs, and tanks. If you like something like that, you might actually enjoy Undead versus Elf. If you'd like doing Ling Roach Bust as a Zurich in StarCraft, you might enjoy Undead versus Night Elf matchup. If you enjoy a timing-based surgical attack where you're running against the clock of the enemy's expansion and you're forced to be aggressive for most parts in the game, but you have to find the moment to not be aggressive and just kind of, you know, gain your strength, then you will maybe enjoy Undead versus Elf. But I personally enjoy slightly different types of games where you can have more freedom in choosing your strategy. Next up, on rank 12 is Night Elf versus Human. Night Elf versus Human feels a little bit similar. Usually humans will fast expand, and as an elf I will feel forced to apply pressure to human and then to put up my own expansion behind it. This is the normal ebb and flow of the matchup, and honestly I think it's a lot of fun to watch, and it's actually pretty fun to play as well. But stopping a human expansion with ranged units, I find it very difficult. Having loads of archers, trying to stay alive against militia and footmen, not easy. Archers have only 245 health, and their Elune's Grace passive offers reduced damage taken from piercing attacks and from spell damage, which is things like Stormbolt or enemy riflemen or water elemental attacks. But it doesn't do anything against footmen and militia and archmage. And as such, coming in with archers trying to cancel an arcane tower or kill some peasants, it never really works. Like you gotta be smarter about how to engineer the entire matchup. And Night Elf versus Human, it's actually part of the reason I also switched to Human, because I found it quite difficult way back when. I do like the matchup Night Elf versus Human if I'm able to go for Warden and I start popping off with Warden, you know, blinking in, Fan of Knives, killing peasants. That it feels like I've got good control there. But then I still need to survive potentially an Archmage Blood Mage rush or a Rifleman push, and it can be quite challenging. I do enjoy this. From rank 12 to rank 1 onwards, it goes to the matchups that I really enjoy. I think the whole top 12 is super good. It is exciting. I just feel like it's difficult and therefore enjoy it a little bit less. Rank 11 is Night Elf versus Undead. The Night Elf versus Undead matchup, expect to be rushed a lot, right? You're gonna get Gargoyle lamed, they're gonna come in and harass your Wisps all the time, you're gonna get Coil Novad. You'll need bears to heal up your heroes, but those bears can die quite fast to destroyers. It is a quite micro-heavy matchup from both sides, and it's honestly a pretty good matchup. I just get harassed a lot when I'm elf against undead, and I do think it's a pretty good matchup. This isn't a list of problems with the matchup, actually, just explaining why the matchup isn't higher for me, right? Night Elf versus Undead is pretty cool. If you can stay alive against gargoyles, if it is a gargoyle strategy, via, you know, some Ancient Protector, some Shredder to recuperate your lumber income, and then you get to bears and dryads, and maybe you'll end up going for roared hippogriffs to deal with air, or perhaps you'll deal with it just via ground, like Pandaren Brewmaster high level, Demon Hunter with an Orb of Venom, and a whole bunch of dryads and bears with upgrades and some good micro. Maybe an expansion as well to put the clamps on them. Night Elf vs Undead can be super manageable. They may also play a ground-based style. Just 1 or 2 destroyers, bunch of ghouls, timing attack, maybe Fiend, maybe not Fiend, right? And that is really interesting to play against as well. If you survive the attack, the Ghoul Frenzy timing attack, then you can be in a pretty good spot. And it's super satisfying to run in with a Demon Hunter, Mana Burn, DK or Lich, take a whole bunch of damage because they cast their spells to punish you, but then you just Staff of Preservation your Demon Hunter home with your Naga or your Panda, which is your second hero, and then you Staff of Teleport back into the fight after healing up from the Moonwells with your Demon Hunter, and then you do it again. Very frustrating for them and a lot of fun, and you feel very mischievous when you're applying such pressure on the undead. Now we get to the top 10, some of my favorite matchups to play. The first one of that is Undead versus Orc. Undead is still Undead, my least favorite race to play in general, though I prefer to play Grubby style Undead than traditional meta. Grubby style is more fun for me, which is things I know aren't competitively super viable at high level, but I enjoy them more. You know, Cryptlord expansion against Orc, Dreadlord expansion against Elf. I already don't really believe it works, but I win more often than I should with it. And so it's still Undead, but it is Undead against Orc. And I know a little bit more about the matchup, at least to appreciate what hurts Orc. And that makes me enjoy it more. Doing some of the things that Undeads have done to me as Undead against Orc feels slightly villainous, but it also feels good to play it from that matchup, and it actually helps me to have more understanding for the matchup from the other side as well. So what really hurts Orcs? Well, if they don't have fortified burrows, and you can get a couple of destroyers morphing, then you can do a complete wholesale slaughter of all their burrows with that juicy 200% bonus damage from the destroyers with magic damage against that heavy armor burrows. Surprisingly, many Orcs do not respect Undead's prerogative to attack their burrows. They feel like Undead generally meets them on the battlefield, or that the Orc will be the attacker, and too many burrows are left undefended, and I gladly abuse that, as I know how weak that makes Orc if they lose 3-4 burrows. It pretty much just pulls the rug out from under them. They can't recover and get strong anymore. Against Orc as well, very powerful to get something like Banshees in conjunction with whatever army you've chosen. Applying Curse on Blademaster is extremely effective to drop his damage, as is Frost Armor as well. And if it is Farseer Tauren Chieftain and they are not using the Blademaster, you're probably not going to get Banshees and Curse, though Banshees and Anti-Magic Shell is still pretty good. But you're most likely going to be focusing on a larger number of destroyers, as neither Farseer nor Tauren Chieftain can really deal with air very well. That is going to have to come from them going either Wind Riders or Raiders to ensnare and bring down your destroyers to the ground. You can bring in your ghouls to counter Orcish headhunters, and you can kite away from Kodos when they go in for that fatal chomp on your ghouls or on your fiends. It is a very skill-based matchup. There are a lot of cool battles. I prefer to play it from the Orcish side, but I still appreciate the hell out of it from the Undead side. Undead versus Orc is not always about expanding. It is quite often about basically an arms race and also a race to get as many of the creeps on the map as possible. So you usually get extremely tactical games where both players are trying to create the most optimal creep route for themselves that also messes with the opponent, either by taking away important links in the chain of their envisioned creep route, forcing them to travel out further where they cannot get the ideal creep route and now they're wasting time because you took something away, or by creep jacking each other and then hurting the other while they're busy with the creep camp, and then basically creating a 2 versus 1 alongside with the creeps. Both races are doing this against each other, and if as an Undead you either do good skeleton scouting, or you have intuition, or map hack, I'm gonna report you, or a shade, which is like legal map hack, then you can do that quite well as an Undead against an Orc. And those are really exciting moments as well. Coming in at rank 9 of my most favorite matchups to play is Undead versus Human. Now, it's pretty common for humans to fast expand. It can be with Paladin Expo, Archmage Expo, or Mountain King Expo. It's usually Archmage, then Mountain King most likely, and occasionally we see Chinese Paladin Expo. Chinese Paladin, this is a strategy developed by Sky and Infi back in 2005 or something. And while Paladin expansion misses the raw damage that Water Elementals offer, and it misses the mana regen that Archmage offers, the Paladin with Holy Light Spec and Divine Shield ability choices can use a Staff of Teleportation to run into the Undead base, do a single hit on an Acolyte, and then Holy Light level 2 to kill an Acolyte. And he can keep repeating this for every Acolyte so long as he has D-Shield. If the Undead opening hero is Paladin, is Death Knight, then the Paladin can just Staff of Teleport out once D-Shield runs out, and he can't even stop him as he doesn't have Sleep or Impale, which would be required to cancel the channel of a Staff of Teleportation. So if you get away as a human with the Paladin Expo, then against the Death Knight opener, you can kill lots of Acolytes while sitting on an expansion and then make lots of Steam Tanks. Even though that sounds toxic as heck, I still enjoy playing against that as an Undead, because you're forced to create strategical amendments to your base layout, your awareness, to stop the Paladin before he gets to your base. That's just a fringe scenario though. More commonly, you'll face either Archmage expansion into Rifle Mountain King Priest, or Archmage expansion into Knights and Flying Machines. The Knights are there to counter your Fiends, and the Flying Machines are there to counter your Destroyers. So as an Undead, your job is either to counter-expand, to pre-counter-expand, so you just do it not even as a reaction, but just as a premeditated opening build, or to do heavy, furious, ongoing, non-stop war of attrition to harass the human expansion attempt, kill as many peasants as you can, cancel towers, keep up the pressure, and then you either go for a Fiend, Lich, Pit Lord break attack, where you just try to break the expansion or make them keep repairing the Town Hall and their towers, and you Rain of Fire and you Nova, etc. Or you go for something like a Destroyer bus, double Slaughterhouse, mass statues into one big Destroyer transformation. You'll hit at like 10 minutes with 4 Destroyers, which have bonus damage against human towers. So then you try to break either their main or their expansion. So they have to build a lot of towers in both when you're going for that build. And it can be quite easy to find a window to break through. They will be trying to harass your Acolytes, which creates this interesting tapestry of battle where you're fighting on multiple fronts. And I love those multitasking management games where you're attacking, defending, harassing, all in 3 different places at the same time. As it taxes not just raw APM, but it taxes people's ability to switch their focus to different parts. And I can gain little efficiency advantages in different situations. Or, if I'm outskilled, lose because of it, which is one of my favorite ways to lose. So no matter what, Undead versus Human feels very interesting and fun. My 8th most favorite matchup to play is Human versus Night Elf. As a Human against Elf feels like a deeply macro game where I get to play with melee units initially, Militia and Footmen, against someone that has mostly ranged units, archers. I'm gonna fast expand almost for sure. right? Then I'm gonna get defend footies, and my footies will take almost no damage from archers, but lots of damage from warden or demon hunter. And then I'm gonna harass their wisps, and they're gonna harass my peasants, and again, we're gonna have battles everywhere. In this matchup, the main meta is that human does a fast expansion at something like the 4 or 5 minute mark, and elf will either throw up a tree of life somewhere not on the expansion, but to walk towards the expansion. So they try to hide it somewhere, which the human needs to try and find to cancel it before it comes up. Or if they can't, they want to make sure to have their own very economical expansion that doesn't get delayed a lot. Night Elf will try to delay them. Then Night Elf is going to do a bunch of creeping, either level up their warden via killing your units or via creeps, or they're harassing you with their demon hunter and leveling that up. Then they're going to get a second hero like Naga or Pandar and Brewmaster, and you can go for a whole bunch of second heroes as human. Once you get to tier 2, you could do Mountain King with some bolt or clap action, bolt clap or bolt bash. You can go Naga. Naga second is quite common against Demon Hunter first, as Demon Hunter's thing is usually coming in, doing a mana burn, and then running away. They want to prep you up with multiple staffs to drop your mana pool. And while Archmage's Brilliance offsets that a bit, mana burn hurts more than can be regenerated. So usually you want heroes that have strong passives against Demon Hunter, so you're not entirely reliant on your spellcasting. So who has passives outside the Panda? There's Pitlord Cleave. He's actually quite good against Demon Hunter because Cleave actually ignores evasion if he hits something and the Demon Hunter is getting hit by the Cleave. The evasion doesn't proc on that, so that's pretty cool. But what's also good, and a bit more of an ignored effect, are orb effect abilities. Orb effect abilities are very low mana cost, such as Naga's Frost Arrow. That means that even if you do get mana burnt, you'll have mana for another Frost Arrow very, very soon after. So first of all, Naga always has some kind of usefulness, even if she gets mana burnt. Soon after, she can do bonus damage and slow with that Frost Arrow once again. Secondarily, Frost Arrow also slows down Demon Hunter's arrival. Let's say, as he's walking towards you, if you auto-attack him with Frost, it takes longer for him to get to you to mana burn, and it takes him longer to walk away again. And the reason this is good is because you make him feel more punished by coming in and mana burn. You deal more damage. For the reason of mana burn, you can also do Archmage Blood Mage second. It's kind of a mana battle, right? You're getting mana burned, but then you siphon mana the demon, and you're actually burning and stealing mana back from him every time he comes in. The low cooldown and the low mana cost activation of siphon mana can be a pretty cool way to deal with it. Blood Mage is also a strong second hero as a tool against Warden or Demon Panda second. Overall, Blood Mage can offer a lot of control and can then also pivot into either Banish to save things and to disable enemy units, but also into Flame Strike. You could even do Blizzard Flame Strike, which can do massive damage to Druids of the Claw based armies. I think you already get the point. I'm very passionate about human against elf because there's so many different hero choices. Archmage Naga, Archmage Blood Mage, Archmage Mountain King, Archmage Panda, and probably more. You can also play single base, and I've done so quite often. You can do a Rifleman Priest opening, Archmage, Mountain King, Rifle Priest, single base, 8 peasant, fast tech, eschew all unnecessary costs, and just have a lot of rifles very early. Do a push early with Archmage level 2, kill as many wisps as you can, or make them lose lumber by moving around and finding hiding places. And then you very quickly follow it up either with Naga, Blood Mage, or Mountain King second, and like 4 rifles and a priest before their Druid of the Claw master training completes. So a lot of different strategies. I enjoy this matchup quite a bit. Rank 8. Next up, human against undead. This is a little bit of a guilty pleasure. Because I feel extremely mischievous as a human player against undead. You see, you go for your expansion. You can do the Chinese Paladin strategy, which I talked about. It's very funny to just kill acolytes every 6 seconds when you have cooldown for Holy Light. But you can also do AM Expo, Mountain King Expo. You can do mass siege engines, triple workshop, mass upgrade, mass tower, mass masonry. Feels very naughty indeed. I don't think it makes me a bad person to enjoy the game even more when I know the opponent is enjoying the game less. I've thought about this a lot. I don't think it makes me a bad person. I think it is me enjoying the fact that I'm getting an emotional edge over the opponent who is hating the playstyle, and therefore it makes it more likely for me to win because they're getting tilted, and that is a competitive advantage, and that's what any competitor should seek. But I have wondered before if enjoying these strategies is, at least in the perspective of the game, is a little evil. Mass Workshops is so funny. You can just see the frustration as they're trying to defend against it. Mass flyings, mass siege engines. But it's not an easy win strategy or anything like that. Everything else still needs to be streamlined and going well. You can also play Rifle Priest. Then they're the naughty one. They get to coil Nova kill Priest and Rifles all the time. This strategy has fallen out of vogue because Undeads get to have fun and you just keep losing units and you need to try and stem the bleeding with ending the game in some kind of way. And then you can play also some kind of other strategy like Knights and Flying Machines. So you've got 3 strats. You expand early. Sometimes they counter-expand. Sometimes they pre-expand. Sometimes they try to break you. And no matter what, I'm going to have a lot of fun in that. It's pretty challenging and exciting in a good way. There's macro, there's micro, and I like it. I like burning the holy light. I like burning the light out of the Undead's eyes. Next up, my first playing as Orc matchup on rank 6. Which one do you guys think it's going to be? Orc versus Night Elf. My least favorite matchup to play as Orc, but still my top 6 most favorite matchup to play. Orc versus Night Elf is challenging. I have often felt a kind of bias that I believe to be true, but Night Elves probably don't believe is true, is that it's easier to play from the Night Elf side against Orc than from the Orc side against Elf. I first found this back in 2005 with the Mass Druids of the Talent strategy. It was very incredible. When this strategy was developed, the matchup went from difficult but fair to, wow, suddenly there are 25 Night Elves that are able to beat the top 3 Orcs in the world, me, Lin, and Focus, or me, Lin, and Fly. The whole top 25 of the Night Elf world can suddenly beat us when before we didn't even know their names. It's like, wow, this strategy is really incredible. It's very easy to play. You make just 1 unit, 1 archer into tier 3 and then mass talents. It felt unfair. It stayed for years that these no-namer elves suddenly were good. Until we all, through rigorous practice, got a lot better at dealing with the strategy. This took years and a lot of study. And then those guys fell off, but the top elves still always give you a lot of trouble. And when playing as elf against orc, I could beat all the top orcs except maybe like the top 3 in the world quite easily with very little practice. And because of this, I got this, I just liked it a little bit less because I felt it wasn't fair. Baby rage, right? Go cry me a river, right? But anyway, the matchup now I think is a lot better. Whereas in 2020, I feel Night Elf had a 65% advantage over 35% Orc. I think in 2024, the matchup is probably better than it almost ever has been. You won't not hear me complain about it sometimes when I'm playing it, but I do think it's pretty 50-50 these days. Nowadays, Night Elf can play a whole bunch of different strats, and they do play a bunch of different strats, which I think is a healthy sign for the meta, because it shows that the surprise element is somewhat important, and that you don't just keep repeating one build ad infinitum, just because it's that strong and that easy to win with. So you've got the Keeper, Alchemist, Huntress, Archer build with the expansion. You've got Keeper, Alchemist, Mass Dryads with the expansion. You've got the Keeper... And I know I'm describing elf perspective now, but the reason I like it is because I face many different strats that I then have to scout for, react for, know the answer for. And it also, none of them feel like so unbeatable that from the orc perspective, I cannot come up with some kind of counterplay, right? So there's the Dryad, Keeper, Alchemist play. Then there's Demon and Keeper and Druid of the Claw strategy. There's still Demon, Beastmaster, Druids of the Talent strategy, but it's not as dominant as before. In particular because Fortified Burrows tier 2 now exist, which before they didn't, which means at any moment in the game, Elf could go kill all your burrows with flying crows, and then the game would generally be over. And so I have to deal with all of these Night Elf builds. I have to know the answers to it. They try to expand often, but not always. And as an orc, I'll generally open Blade Master and then Shadow second. So that does feel pretty tunneled. Like I'm tunneling on the same hero combination every game, which is not the worst. Like I don't mind. Like if I didn't like doing a lot of the same thing, I wouldn't have played Warcraft 3 for 22 years, right? So it's not like I'm like, oh wow, another Blade Master. I hate this. No, I love it. I still love it. But Farseer, not super viable for the most part against Night Elf. Blade TC does still have some play, depending on what you scout. If they are playing talents, you can still Blade Master Tauren Chieftain. And you can, I feel like you can somewhat get away with Farseer first sometimes as well, though it may depend on which level of player I'm playing against. And then, while it always feels difficult early game, the removal of Ultra Vision from Tier 1 has made the matchup feel a lot more fair, because now both players need to scout each other, which you can do with Peons, Feral Spirits, or Mirror Image, or heroes and units, right? And the Night Elf can do it with Wisps, Treants, or their heroes. But Night Elf no longer has 1800 vision when you have 800 vision at night, which is most of the early game, nighttime. And the fact that they could get 50 gold, 50 wood, ultra vision, just seeing everything, and they are literally following you at 1400 range, and you don't even know they're there. And they're just waiting for you to start creeping, and then you start creeping, and sure enough, there they are. And you can't scout them, because the moment you start moving a unit closer to their army, they start stepping back. So you're like, anyone there? No? There? No? There? No? Okay, cool. I'm gonna start creeping. And then they're like, Rah! They're like, oh, come on. So Ultra Vision, being at tier 2, does feel a lot safer, a lot fairer. Now both players can play the game of Vision, and I think that's a good thing. It is a challenging matchup, which is why it's a lot of fun. It's a matchup as my main. I think we've seen many different strategies over the years from this matchup, and that's what has kept it interesting. Rank 5. Orc versus Human. My least favorite meta of Orc versus Human was probably 2005 to 2010, where they would do Archmage level 2.1 plus Beast level 1, and then they would do a 5 Footman, 1 Sword, 1 Priest, 6 Militia, 3 Ivory Tower, Tower Rush. This was an attack that hit at like 6-7 minutes, and they did it every single time. Every time. And you know it's coming, they're still doing it, and they're still winning. It was very toxic. It took away a lot of the fun, because you were like trying to get to tier 2, you have to stop them creeping, or they're level 3, so you keep them level 2, but now your blade is hurt and didn't creep himself at all, and then the Beastmaster comes out, they cancel your tier 2 buildings and tower you. And it was really hard to stop, but some balance changes means that that is no longer really possible to play it like that. And then there were a lot of really cool matchups. Like, I love the games on Melting Valley, where they go Mountain King Expo, and then you're going to try and harass them and slow them down from their expansion. And then they're going to go for 0-3 upgraded Griffins. And you're going to play Blade Shadow Alchemist. The reason this is so cool is because this was the meta from both sides, and it's the only meta where I ever got to make Alchemist. Generally, Orc players do not make a lot of Tavern heroes because they do not fit better than another. They're never the better choice compared to another. But in this situation, Alchemists were actually the best choice, because Acid Bomb is the only way to make Batrider Unstable Concoction deal more damage as an Orc. Orb of Corruption works as well, but how often are you going to have that? Because Batrider Concoction does not scale with upgrades, but armor and health on the Griffin does scale with their upgrades. So the only way you could actually, keep up and win is Alchemist 3rd, which was really fun to play with that hero, because I really don't get that opportunity much. Then there's also been lots of cool metas, such as Farseer TC Grunt Shaman versus AM Mountain King Rifle Priest. This is a very cool skill-based matchup where both players have a lot of tools to micro, play tactics, play creep route deviations, apply pressure, do timing attacks, manage their items. Very cool, very skill-based matchup, and I feel like it's a lot of fun from both sides. My fourth most favorite matchup to play in Warcraft 3 is the other perspective of the same matchup. Human against Orc. All those things that I said humans can do, I can play as those. And unlike with Undead against Orc, I feel like with Human against Orc, I can actually be quite good. Like, I know how to abuse Orc in all the right ways, with Footman Burrow defense attacks, with expansion, with one base play. And I feel like usually when I'm playing with Undead against Night Elf, I feel kind of clueless about everything. But when I play Human against Orc, I feel like I'm more aware of how the matchup works than most of the opponents that I face. I could be meeting quite good Orc players over the past many years as a human, but when I just do like dirty tricks and slow and then kiting, the Orcs always look so stupid and slow. I'm like, look at him, he's slowed. They like try to squeeze with their big army, and I just thunderclap and blizzard everything and slow, and then I kite back and I think, it's so easy. How could you ever lose this? Of course you can, but it feels fun to do that as a human against Orc. I always feel a bit like a betrayer when I use another race to beat Orc, which as an Undead I cannot do often enough, because actually when I play Undead against Orc, Orc feels a little OP to me against Undead. Like all those things that Undead beat me with, I can't do those things to Orc because I haven't got the skill to do it with Undead. So it's not as fun. But as a human, my skill is actually there to mess up the Orc big time. And it's a lot of fun. It's kind of a form of catharsis to play it from the other side. Like, see how easy it is? See? And likewise, I feel the same about my third most favorite matchup to play, Night Elf against Orc. All those things that I just said apply with human, I feel the same with Night Elf. It is so much fun to destroy orcs with elf, just to prove how to do it, right? I can do an expansion, I can do mass talents, I can do mass tier 1, mass dryads. There's so many different builds, and to me, the orcs that I play against always look so noob when I'm playing as elf. Again, that's probably not going to be true if I'm playing against like top 5. Like, I would hate probably to play Night Elf against Lynn's orc. I don't think that's going to look too pretty. But against many of the top orcs, like in Europe over the past 2 decades, elf against orc has felt so easy. And it's a lot of fun. You can play a lot of different builds. You can Ancient Protector rush them. Sneak in a little Ancient Protector. Sneak in a Tree of Life somewhere. You can mass Huntresses. You could do the Beastmaster mass Huntress build. Demon Keeper first. There's so many options. And I do think I would lose. I do think without Ultravision, it's going to be a little bit less funny and more scary, which it should be. Warcraft 3 should be scary. Right, it's Warcraft, after all. But this has been a very fun matchup, and I do like it from both sides. Rank 2. We're getting to the final ones. I'm actually going to go to rank 1 first, since that eliminates the suspense about what rank 1 is going to be. There's only 2 matchups left. So let's go to rank 1. What is my most favorite matchup of all time, you guys think? That is correct. It's Orc Mirror. Orc Mirror is so good. I don't know why it's doing this, but never mind this. It's the magic of Markdown that doesn't like reverse ordered list. Orc versus Orc is my favorite of all time. First of all, I can never be under either the knowing the truth. I can never know the truth, nor be under the delusion of a mistruth, like of a not truth, that it is not balanced. I know it's balanced. I know it's fair. So I cannot be under a misapprehension or to know the truth of things that, like, see, it's easier for them. I know it's going to be fair. So it takes care of all the potential doubt that I might have that I'm being shorted here on the fairness end of stick, which, by the way, is an unproductive thought anyway, but I'm only human and I can have some of those mental weaknesses sometimes. Rather than 100% focusing on how to get better, how to get good, those deflective ego protection thoughts that I've always fought against but are never entirely absent. So first of all that, but much more than that, I love Orc versus Orc. We've had many different metas. There has been Farseer Firelord with Kodos and Demolishers in early 2004. In Reign of Chaos, you would have Mass Casters against Mass Casters, or Mass Windriders against Mass Windriders. There has been a lot of Blade Shadowhunter with Grunt Raider Walker Mirror, and then 1 or 2 Kodos, which has felt very competitive. Initially it was with a slow tier 2 and lots of Warmill upgrades. From 2005 to 2010, it was pretty much all we played. Blade Shadow, Grunt Raider Walker, Kodo with upgrades from Warmill. And then in 2020 and beyond, we started seeing more fast tech on a single burrow, still with Blade, still with Shadow, still with Grunt Raider Walker, and then Kodo. There was a really cool meta that happening between myself and Infi, the Chinese human player that turned to random player and content creator, but still extremely high level player. I loved his take on Orc. He started to fast tech and implement torrents into the play, and it was actually less easy to stop than I thought. First of all, he's not an Orc main, so he shouldn't be beating me at all, right? Wrong. Extremely talented player, and with very cool creative thoughts on the game. It was so much fun seeing Orc from a new dimension in Orc Mirror against him. I ended up mirroring him sometimes and going torrents myself. There was one extremely cool video that I uploaded to my Warcraft channel, Follow Grubby, where I had mass Witch Doctors and he had mass torrents on Amazonia. I was spawned in the top right, he was bottom left, and I was facing like 60, 70 population torrents with like 50 or 60 population doctors. And it just became this extremely epic game. And yeah, I just love it. I just love it. Orc Mirror at its standard is an extremely creeping and micro heavy game. It's usually a race to whoever has Blade Master 3 first, and then whoever has Shadow 3 first. Shadow 3 puts you in optimum fighting condition. Shadow level 3 with Healing Wave level 2 gives you the efficiency and the sustain to keep your army alive in conjunction with Heal Scroll and Spirit Link. So Shadow 3 is a massive goal and objective in the game. Blade 3 is a big objective because it unlocks Windwalk level 2, which greatly increases the scouting abilities because of the increase in movement speed that Windwalk level 2 offers. A Blade level 3 is difficult, though not impossible to catch, which means he can do a lot of reconnaissance and then also do either an assassination on units or on the Shadow Hunter. You can do a lot of tracking where the opponent is, giving yourself more freedom to creep up your own Shadow Hunter. Battles themselves, from anywhere from 40 population to 50 to 60 to 70, are deeply micro intensive, with a lot of the essentials of Warcraft 3 battle micro coming to fruition. Talk about things like normal attack damage on medium armor to leverage the bonus damage, piercing attack damage and siege attack damage to focus unarmored, such as the Kodos and the Spirit Walkers, to leverage that bonus attack damage, and also your Spirit Walkers with magic damage to focus the Grunts who have heavy armor, which have a 100% bonus damage as well. So you're constantly thinking about the armor types and the damage types. You're ensnaring the enemy units so they can't get away or can't get to you. You're ensnaring enemy Kodos so they can't devour. Meanwhile, you're trying to devour things with your own Kodos. You're heal waving and spirit linking units that drop low. You're disenchanting to remove enemy spirit link so that you can focus down their targets better. And then they're re-spirit linking, so it also becomes a battle of Spirit Walker mana efficiency. And you're even bringing in up to 5 or 6 of your 7 lumber peons in a last-ditch effort to add extra damage. Yes, even damage, even though it's low, it helps. Spirit linking connectivity to spread damage further across a larger amount of units. And also body blocking abilities. Those peons, sometimes they seem so unthreatening that they're ignored. And you can suddenly grab a bunch of them and surround the enemy Shadow Hunter. The weakest hug of all time, though still enough to close the distance with more threatening units, so you can try to take down the enemy Shadow Hunter. At any moment's notice, your Blade Master is just one step away from getting Disenchanted, Spirit Link gone. Hexed, can no longer use Invulnerability Potion or Windwalk. And then Focus Fired with Ensnare and Windwalk and Critical Strike and Backstab damage. So all of that together makes it a very knife on a edge type of battle and gameplay. The battles are relatively slower because of all the sustain. And that actually creates a very long fight. It could be a fight that takes many minutes, as much as many minutes, which feels incredibly long if you're used to StarCraft battles, but it allows for an extreme amount of skill expression through posturing, positioning, saving, sustaining, healing, damaging, and focus firing. I love it. It's my favorite matchup of all time, and I recommend it to everyone. And actually, one of the biggest reasons that I am an Orc player is because generally when I play an RTS, mirror matchup, which is what we call Undead v Undead, Night Elf v Night Elf, Human v Human, and Orc versus Orc, the mirror matchup is usually the least popular to play and to watch for most people. And if you're not having as much fun in it, then it becomes a chore. So usually when I pick my race in an RTS, be it StarCraft 1, StarCraft 2, or Warcraft 3, or any future RTS that I play, I try to pick the race, not just that seems most fun in the best moments where you play a different matchup, but I try to see which one has the least tedious or stupid mirror matchup. Because I'm going to have to deal with the worst as well, right? And not only do I think Orc versus Orc is the least stupid mirror matchup, I actually think it's the greatest. So that makes Orc such a good choice for me. It's actually the reason why I wouldn't play Zerg in StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2. I love Zerg against Terran, I love Zerg against Protoss, but I do not like Zerg mirror in either StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2. That's 33% of the game, because it's only 3 races. So if there are a normal ratio of Zerg players, 1 out of 3 games, I'm going to be like, ah, damn, another mirror matchup. So find a race that you like by also remembering that you're going to have to play that race in mirror matchup. And perhaps based on my breakdown, you'll have a bit of a better idea as well how some matchups play out and whether that's something that you might like, depending on if you like macro games or micro and battle games. Because I don't know if I mentioned, but Orc almost never expands in Orc Mirror. So if you don't like macro games and you like the battles more, then this matchup. But if you like the macro games, then you could do something like Human against Night Elf. So you could play either Human or Elf, right? And Human against Human is very macro. In fact, I think Human is the most macro heavy race in the game. And maybe Orc and Undead are the most micro heavy in the game. And Night Elf is in between. So maybe that gives you a bit of a better idea as well. And of course, by process of elimination on position 2, it is Orc versus Undead. I like Orc versus Undead quite a lot. It's my second favorite matchup to play, partially because for a very long period, Orc versus Undead was quite favored for Orc. From between 2000, like in Reign of Chaos, Undead actually had the edge, but that only lasted like 9 months. Undead had a bit of an edge because Orc had trouble healing and Fiends were quite strong against many things. But then from TFT onwards, for the next 16 years, Orc had the edge against Undead. And I think most people knew this, and it was not like a 70 versus 30 edge, but it was more than 55 versus 45, I think. And that favored me. That made it comfortable. Doesn't mean I always win, but it made it much more comfortable to win against Undead, and I like that comfort. And I also liked how it played out, because Orc versus Undead was the only matchup where I was allowed to be proactive. Along with Orc Mirror, of course, which is literally mirrored. You can do anything you want. But in Orc versus Undead, it was the only one where Orc was the pace setter. Orc could decide to go for a tier 1 expansion off the back of just a single grunt. They could do a 2 or 3 grunt expansion, or they could wait to tier 2 and 4 grunts in their Tauren Chieftain and First Raider and then put down an expansion. But no matter what, you were the one that was setting the pace. Undead had to find a way to problem solve to stop it. That feeling that I always have against Night Elf and Human, where I need to try and stop their dirty deeds and their expansion, now I got to be that guy that could choose to make an expansion and be like, you deal with it. Like, if you don't do anything in the next 5 minutes, I'm gonna have too much stuff. I'll just throw stuff at you, the kitchen sink too. You're gonna have to find a way to dodge it. And generally they couldn't, right? And sometimes they try to do a surgical attack, And then it gets to that exciting timing moment where I know if I hold the attack, then the Rohirrim and Gandalf are going to come and they're going to save us. Because if I hold this attack, I'll have too many units for them to stop. So it's all down to whether Helm's Deep will fall or not. And so I get to do that big defense. And I generally like defending more than attacking in an RTS. So I get to play from the defensive position, absorb their attack, position, prepare, and it's pretty fun. It's a different perspective. I don't get to play as much. It's only 1 in 4 matchups that works out that way. It's not that much like that anymore in the current meta, because from 2020 onwards, Undead received many deserved buffs that even out the matchup a lot. And I think Orc versus Undead in the current year, 2024, is fairer than it has ever been. It's actually, I've sometimes wondered whether Undead has the edge, but that might be greatly influenced by the amazing thought leader and player Happy that has created many innovations in the matchup, even as, of course, Lynn has been trying to do the same thing from the Orcish side, and me to a degree as well, in Europe here, and then with the Headhunter build and everything. But there are more builds possible for both Orc and Undead than there usually have been. There's less early tier 2 expo by Orc. Undead cannot stop it. There's a lot of creeping wars. And just like Orc Mirror, I feel like Orc versus Undead comes down a lot to creeping. Not to one clear timing where it's like you must hit now or the game is over. You can marinate. You can kind of marinate. You can creep a lot, you can creep a bit, you can harass early, you can harass late, and it feels true for both races. So it almost feels like it has the fairness of the mirror matchup, in my opinion. There's a good amount of creeping, which means the power fantasy growth of your heroes. It goes up, you get stronger, they get stronger, and then who grew the best? Who lifted the most? Who's the strongest now? So, great matchup. So that's Orc versus Undead, and that is my second most favorite, with Orc Mirror being my favorite. Hope this also helped you to choose your race more if you decide to play Warcraft 3, but you weren't really sure how you feel about the matchups. And of course, your opinion might be different than mine based on what I've said. Now, gonna be a little shorter about this one, and of course I don't actually need rank 16, but I already wrote it out because there's only 10 matchups to spectate, and if I change it markdown it's gonna give me trouble, so I'll just do like this. And so yeah, let's go to the 10th most favorite matchup to spectate. This will be a little briefer, but I still wanted to let you guys know. My least favorite matchup to spectate is Undead versus Undead. Yeah, it's just too dark. It's too dark. I'm not rooting for anyone. Like, I just want it to be over. I don't really watch this matchup almost at all. I remember back when I watched almost every matchup, every replay, because I wanted to learn about all the other players. There could be 100 top players in the world, and I wanted to learn how all of them think so I know how I can defeat them. And that even included sometimes watching their mirror matchup, even though it did not personally affect me, just to build like a detective case on them. But it was not my favorite part to do. And sometimes I had to do this Undead versus Undead watching. I generally prefer to watch others. I definitely watched all Orc replays, but not all Undead mirror replays. Next up, Human versus Human. Not very fun to watch for me. I think it's a lot more fun to play than to watch. Seeing both players expand and then just kind of trade footmen against each other and then trade breakers against each other. Not usually my favorite way to spend the day. I feel the same way about Night Elf versus Night Elf. The most fun about Elf, in my opinion, to watch is when there is a mismatch in strategies. So it's not Priestess versus Priestess with mass hunts, and it's not Demon versus Demon, but it's one player is playing Demon and Druids of the Claw, and the other player is playing Priestess Huntress with an expansion into Double Lord Dryad with Naga or Dark Ranger second. My most favorite Night Elves to watch are Moon and Foggy, who is heavily inspired with his strategies by Moon. Moon is a super fun Night Elf mirror player to watch because he injects a lot of intelligence and tactics into his Night Elf play. But if you take a lot of elves, top elves, they play extremely cookie cutter. Like Kaho and Colorful, they just do Demon every game with bears. And while it is effective and very solid and very high level, one game looks too much like the next for me. Rank 7, Night Elf versus Undead. as I start the next track here, Night Elf's music ambiance. Night Elf versus Undead is... it's more that I am not as familiar with the matchup because I don't play it a lot. I don't play a lot of Undead, and therefore I have a little bit less, let's say, interest to study it. There's nothing wrong with the matchup as far as I'm concerned. I just... I won't wake up early to catch a Night Elf versus Undead. Rank 6 is Human versus Undead. This is where it starts to get really interesting for me personally. From both perspectives, Human v Undead or Undead versus Human, it's interesting. Either both players expand these days. We see a lot of Lich first fast expansion, and Human doing an Archmage or Manticing first fast expansion. There's going to be fireworks. Both are going to be harassing each other's workers, each other's gold mine. 2 versus 2 base. Then we can either see workshops or we could see knights and flying machines, which is also workshop. But I mean, we could see tanks. Both players playing 3 heroes. You see every aspect of Warcraft 3, the micro and the macro, and it's really good to watch. I don't play this matchup much myself, which is why it's interesting to me to watch, because it is obvious who is doing well based on looking at it to me. As much as I like playing Orc versus Orc, to watch it is very interesting to me when it's 2 high-level players, but it is not as interesting to me to watch it as to play it. I feel like this kind of matchup, because I am both sides of the matchup, Orc, I can learn everything I need to learn just by playing a lot, right? Orc against Elf is a little different. If I need to learn Orc against Elf and I'm currently I'm struggling to find a solution, I'll go watch lots of Orc versus Elf replays from other players. But in Orc Mirror, you're always being shown your mistakes as you lose to someone. So you don't really need other replays. You can just copy whatever your opponent did. And so Orc versus Orc is self-developing and less requiring for me to seek outside information. Because if I watch 2 other Orcs, I'll learn how Orc A beats Orc B. But I can already learn how any Orc beats me. And that's what I need to improve. So I don't need to do any kind of comparison extrapolation event where I try to match up timings. No, I am the subject. So just do more testing on myself. So I don't need to watch it as much. Human versus Night Elf is my 4th most favorite matchup to watch. It is my most favorite non-orc matchup to watch, because I think this is deeply tactical. It's always been fun to see, like Moon against Infi, Moon against Sky, Moon against Todd. Lots of cool games there, and both players are expanding. We can see Warden, we can see Demon, we see Human doing like big rifle, priest breaker timings. I loved it when there were like rifle, breaker, mortar, priest, sorceress. And then Night Elf would do Bear Dryad, but then they add Fairy Dragons to deal with the low amount of Riflemen and the large amount of casters. Human would then add Flying Machines. Then Night Elf would add Hippogriffs to deal with the Flying Machines to protect their Fairy Dragon. And if the Human army then added Rifles to deal with the Fairies instead, then the Bears could overwhelm. Sometimes we saw Mountain Giants coming from Elf. And if the Human eschewed anti-air, and Night Elf decided not to go Fairy Dragon, Elf could eventually solve the tower crawl that Human often does on the Night Elf expansion by going for Chimera to deal with the mortars and the casters. We've seen so much development. It felt the most like StarCraft 1 to me. I love StarCraft 1, and I loved watching replays in StarCraft 1 where you saw the entire progression through the tech tree, from Zergling to Hydra to Mutalisk to eventually Ultralisk, and then even the Queens, and then even the Guardians, right? And the other players like developing as well, Marine, Medic, and then eventually the Battlecruiser. Like that kind of progression as you gradually go up to the next tier, while all the time fighting for every inch of terrain. I feel like Human Night Elf shows it the best. I think it's one of the best matchups to watch in general. Then for my rank 3 to watch, Orc versus Undead. I love the deeply micro-based battles that you have. The kind of glass cannon type of damage that you can bring. You can focus down an Undead hero with Hex and Focus Fire, or you get your hero focused with Coil Nova and Silence. because of this, it's always exciting to watch, almost like an FPS, because anyone could die like that. But when that power is not being focused on a single hero, then there's just a lot of posturing and saving with healing wave on the one side and coil on the other side, as there's a war of attrition to kill each other's units and try to gain an edge in army size. So I think they're really cool battles. There's a lot of creeping, there are a lot of timings that can be leveraged by both players. That's super nice to watch. Then my most favorite to watch of all is Orc versus Night Elf. Even though it's my 6th most favorite to play, because of this, I often need to watch other players, and I feel like there's a lot to learn. Because of my own biases against Night Elf sometimes, whenever I watch other players like Fly or Lynn play Orc against Night Elf, I see things that I feel shouldn't work, aka I don't think they're good, but then I see them work, which is I don't think it's cognitive dissonance, but I don't know the word exactly, but it is opposite of what I expect. And then I learn from that, and that is deeply fascinating, right? But I also see elves win, and then it makes me feel angry, right? But all of that together, I am getting the entire spectrum of emotions from this matchup. There's lots of... As a spectator, I feel like it's super interesting because there's lots of strategy, there's lots of micro. And my rank 2 most favorite to watch is Orc versus Human. And I don't have much to say about that anymore. I've said everything I wanted to say. That was about it. Hope you guys enjoyed my description of the matchups, to see my little list. Almost like a tier list, but with 10 to 16 tiers. This was my ranking the best Warcraft 3 matchups. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then hit me up with a sub, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.